The morning light filtered through the tall windows of Charles Whitmore's home, casting long shadows across the marble floor. He moved slowly, deliberate in every step, as he entered the den and adjusted the panel on the wall behind a painting. The safe clicked open. He didn't need the money that lay inside, stacks of cash, a few pieces of heirloom jewelry. It was never about the contents. Today, it was about something deeper, something buried under layers of suspicion and past betrayals. He left the safe door slightly ajar, a silent trap waiting to spring. Then he walked away. Charles had grown old with wealth but not with trust. Since his wife passed, he'd lived alone, save for the quiet presence of Ruth, the black maid he'd hired 6 months ago. She was efficient, soft-spoken, and never asked for much, just work, pay, and peace. Still, a doubt had crept in over time. What kind of person had he let into his home? Was her politeness just a mask? The safe would tell him what he needed to know. Retreating into his study, he watched the hallway through a small monitor wired to a hidden camera. Minutes passed. His fingers tapped nervously on the desk. He told himself it was just precaution, not malice. But in truth, he hoped she'd prove him wrong. Because somewhere beneath the guarded heart of an old man was a faint, aching desire to believe in someone again. And so, he waited, not for a thief, but for a sign. Ruth moved through the hallway with her usual calm, a basket of folded laundry in her arms. As she passed the den, something caught her eye, the safe. It was open, just slightly, but enough for anyone to notice. She paused. For a long moment, she said nothing, did nothing. The silence around her seemed to grow heavier. Then, slowly, she stepped inside and set the basket down. She wasn't tempted. That part had left her long ago, back when life was about surviving night by night in a rusted-out Honda Civic with a broken heater. Back when trust was something she gave freely, and it was stolen more often than not. But this? This was different. This felt intentional. A test. Ruth looked at the stacks of $100 bills, the sparkling brooch on top, the crisp edges of unspent wealth. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small envelope, slightly creased, with her name scrawled in cursive on the front. Inside was a folded photo, her younger self smiling through exhaustion, holding a baby wrapped in a hospital blanket, and a handwritten note. She placed the envelope gently atop the cash, then closed the safe halfway, just as she found it. Her voice, barely a whisper, broke the silence. "Lord, thank you for letting me stand here, not needing a thing." She turned, picked up her basket, and walked away, unaware that someone was watching, stunned not by what she took, but by what she gave. Charles sat alone in his study, the house quiet but for the soft hum of the air conditioner and the ticking of an old grandfather clock. He had waited all morning to check the safe, expecting the worst, or maybe hoping to be proven right. People always disappointed in the end, he told himself. That was how he had survived so long, so rich, so guarded. He opened the safe, his breath held tight in his chest. But the cash was untouched. The jewelry sat exactly as he left it. On top of it all lay an envelope. Not money. Not theft. A letter. With trembling hands, he opened it. The handwriting was careful, graceful. Ruth's. "Mr. Whitmore," it began, "if you're reading this, then I guess you were watching. I figured you left it open on purpose. That's all right. I've had worse done to me by people with less reason." She wrote about losing her daughter to illness, about raising her grandson alone, about the years she spent sleeping in her car just trying to keep him in school. She spoke of how this job, this quiet, steady life in his home, gave her dignity again. "I never took what wasn't mine," she wrote. "Not even when I had nothing." Charles stared at the photograph she'd enclosed, a young Ruth, eyes proud and tired, holding a swaddled baby. He felt something twist in his chest. Guilt. Humility. Something like grace. He sank into his chair, whispering, "What have I done?" That evening, the kitchen felt unusually still. 2 mugs of tea sat between them on the table, his untouched, hers already half gone. Ruth sat with her hands folded in her lap, calm as ever, but Charles's were shaking slightly as he tried to find the right words. "I left the safe open on purpose," he finally said, eyes not meeting hers. "I needed to know," his voice trailed off. "No, that's not true. I didn't need to know. I just didn't know how to believe anymore." Ruth looked at him for a long moment. Her face didn't harden, didn't shift with offense or pain. She simply nodded. "I figured," she said gently. "You've been kind, Mr. Whitmore, but you're lonely. Lonely people forget how to trust." He looked up at her then, eyes glassy. "You didn't take a dime. You could've. No one would have known." She smiled, the same soft, knowing smile she gave when folding his clothes or bringing him tea without being asked. "I didn't need to," she said. "I've already been given more than money could buy. A bed. A roof. A little peace." There was a silence between them, one that didn't ache with suspicion this time, but settled with understanding. "I thought I was testing you," he said quietly. "But it turns out, you were showing me something I'd forgotten existed." Ruth reached over and gently touched his hand. "Trust isn't something you take," she said. "It's something you return." 1 month later, the house no longer echoed with silence. Laughter spilled from the kitchen, where Ruth's grandson, Malcolm, now a college freshman, chatted animatedly with guests at the small gathering. The backyard was strung with lights, simple but warm, as neighbors, old friends, and even a few of Charles's distant relatives gathered around tables filled with home-cooked food. Charles stood near the back porch, a man changed, not by pity, but by purpose. When it came time to speak, he cleared his throat and stepped forward, holding a microphone with a slight tremble. Ruth stood beside him, unsure of what he was about to say. "Most of you know Ruth as the woman who's kept this house running better than I ever could," he began. "But I want you to know who she really is. She's the kind of person who, when tested with temptation, answered with character. Who gave without being asked. Who reminded an old man what grace looks like." He turned to Ruth, his voice softening. "You didn't just take care of my home. You helped me heal in it." Then he gestured to a small plaque unveiled beside them, the Ruth Jennings Scholarship Fund, established to support single mothers returning to school. Ruth's hand flew to her mouth, tears welling. Malcolm hugged her tightly, whispering, "You earned this, Grandma." And as the sun set over the crowd, Charles smiled for the first time in years, not because he had given something away, but because, at last, he had found something worth believing in again.